Retains the right to record all phone calls received during this program for future promotions.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Steven Solof, and this is InformTheVoteNJ Radio Hour here on Cruisin 92.1 WVLT in Vineland. And today we're sitting down with Carol Sabo, the mayor of West Cape May, who is running for one of two open General Assembly seats in District 1 this November against Republican incumbents Antoine McClellan and Eric Simonson. Now, before we bring Mayor Sabo into the discussion, I want to do my normal introductory report to help set the tone. I'll take a few minutes to do something I think is important. Explain the context for these interviews, talk about timelines, and frankly, make a bit of an apology. If you've been following this project, you know the drill. Every election season, I get the official list of candidates from the county clerk's office. I send out emails, letters, make phone calls, show up to public meetings and community events. In short, I do everything I reasonably can to ensure candidates know I'm here and that they have an open invitation to share their message through this platform. And I say all this because I want to be clear with both my listeners and the candidates. This isn't me sitting at home waiting for press releases to fall in my lap. It's active outreach. And most of the people in these races know who I am at this point. Which means when information doesn't make its way to my hub, it's not for lack of trying. It's because candidates are making conscious decisions about how they want to campaign and where they want to engage. That brings me to my apology, specifically to the folks running for Millville City Commission. Some of you may have heard me casually say in our earlier conversations, you got plenty of time to get back to me. And while that was well-intentioned, I need to correct the record. Millville's race is no ordinary race. There are 5 seats open, and by the time the petition dust settles, there could be 20 or more candidates on the ballot. That's not just a lot for voters to process. That's a mountain of information for me to sort through, upload, analyze, and advertise in a way that's fair to everyone. If we, as a community, agree that voters deserve a robust, comprehensive, and fair election process, then dilly-dallying is not an option. So to those candidates who took me at my word that there is plenty of time, I apologize. I should have been clearer. It's nearly August. Vote-by-mail ballots go out on September 20th. If we want voters, especially early voters, to have time to go over this information, we really need a comprehensive rollout by early September. And for me to do my job properly, one could reasonably argue that I need final candidate information in my hand by about August 24th. That might be the real timeline. And this isn't just about Millville. It speaks to a broader reality of campaign culture. Over the weekend, I ran into Jack Ciattarelli, yes, the Republican gubernatorial candidate, at the Puerto Rican Day Parade. I've approached Jack a few times this year, and his team knows who I am and what this project is about. And I get it. Running a statewide campaign is serious business, and there are probably 1,000 other people like me vying for his time. But here's what stood out to me. Nearly everyone involved in South Jersey politics seemed to be there. Congressman Van Drew, Senator Testa, county commissioners, school board candidates, you name it. That might be 50 man-hours between commute times, showing up early to be ready, being there for the literal hour, and perhaps not rushing after the event. All that dedicated to being at a parade. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Public appearances matter. But if there's time for that, wouldn't it also be reasonable to carve out an hour somewhere along the way for a sit-down conversation? Again, not necessarily with me, but with any decent interviewer about what gubernatorial candidates actually know about Cumberland County, without necessarily having to go to countless breakfast meetings that might be off limits to certain people. And don't get me wrong, those breakfast meetings are generally great, but some of them are just casual Saturday morning check-ins, and I don't want to start guessing which one might be the one Jack Ciattarelli shows up to and finally addresses the new direction of the new county jail with Camden, the status of the NABAV extension, and the possible completion of Route 55. That kind of preparation wouldn't take 50 hours. It would take maybe 2 hours of coordination between Jack, Senator Testa, and Commissioner Director Sorrow to nail down the message. That's the kind of meat and potatoes discussion voters deserve. And frankly, it would be a major step ahead of Mikey Sherrill, who, as far as I can tell, hasn't even shown up in Cumberland County this season. And I've heard she's even canceled a few scheduled appearances. And I'm not saying this to single anyone out or to make enemies. I'm saying it to emphasize the point. This project exists because voters deserve more than surface-level campaigning. They deserve direct, substantive communication with the people asking for their votes. And that's what brings us to today. This conversation with Carol Sabo is step one. The kind of content I wish every candidate had ready to go on day one. It's an opportunity to introduce herself, talk about why she's running, and explain her vision for representing this district. As always, the format is simple. First, we'll get to know Carol, her background, her experience, and what led her to run for higher office. Then we'll go through her campaigning message, how she frames her candidacy in her own words. Finally, we'll touch briefly on my civic advocacy priorities, reintroducing local civics in schools, county-facilitated candidate information packets, and rebuilding the local press. This isn't meant to be a debate or a deep dive into every pressing issue. That comes later. This is a starting point. But as voters, you should be paying attention to who steps up to provide that starting point and who doesn't. With that, let's get started. Mayor Sabo, welcome.
Wow, that's a lot of background.
Yeah. Well, it's, one of the things that I always try to keep in mind is something I learned in high school. One of my English teachers told me, which was assume your audience knows nothing, right? Mm-hmm. Every time somebody puts on this radio show, it might be the first time. They might not know who I am at all. They might not know who you are at all. So I try to set the tone at least a little bit.
It always comes back to that pivotal teacher, doesn't it?
Very important, especially when you get those little nuggets that you never forget.
Mine was Mr. Fox, my U.S. history teacher in high school. He was definitely the one who really pushed the critical thinking on everything. So he's the one I remember the most. And that was a couple more years ago, I think, than you were in high school, Steve. So.
Yeah, well, that concept of critical thinking comes up a lot in these discussions. I've had a discussion about a month ago with a political higher-up who wants to remain nameless, but he noticed I said that a couple times in one of our meetings, and he was like, "Oh, okay, I see what you're doing. You're trying to get a little bit deeper than what might be on the website already," and that's basically it.
Yeah, because we could all read that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, Carol, why don't you tell me a little bit about how you grew up and how you got into politics?
Okay, So I am born and raised in New Jersey. I was born in Somerset County in Warren Township. It's the town I grew up in. My dad was a public educator. My mom was a nurse. She basically stayed home and took care of us most of my childhood. Went back when to work when both my sisters were in college. My dad, he was a math teacher, and then worked his way up through administration. He was the superintendent of the high school I went to. I never got away with anything. He was always there with, his eyes. Just all he had to do was look at me. So
yeah, I know that look.
Yeah, so that's how
maybe
I was.
Maybe that's part of South Jersey culture.
So this was Central Jersey.
Oh, sorry.
But this was Central Jersey. But it was. A great upbringing, and he taught me the value of a public education. I went to college in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Was there for 4 years, and after I graduated, I said I have to get back to New Jersey. Pennsylvania was not for me.
What do you mean? Do you want to?
Well, I had
dive
to.
Into what that means?
I had to get back to the coast. That was really where I grew up in the suburbs of. In Central Jersey, but I really wanted to be near the coast. So after I graduated, I lived in Lavallette, which is in Ocean County, for a while, and then in 1986, my husband and I, we weren't married at the time, came down to Cape May for a little vacation. Said, "This seems like a really nice place. Why don't we look into moving here?" And I was working for the state at the time. I did child abuse investigations. And I was working in Asbury Park. And I just started working, and I put in for a transfer to the Cape May office, and after a period of a couple of months, they granted the transfer when there was an opening, and we moved to West Cape May. And I've been there ever since. So that was from 1987 till today.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, so...
you must really love it then, huh?
I do love it there. Yeah,
That's cool.
It was definitely the best place for me to land. So subsequently, I worked for the state in the local office. In 1997, I went to grad school at Rutgers, was on leave from work for 2 years through a Title IV federal program. I was able to go back to school. So I got my master's in social work in 99, and after a couple of years, I ended up finding a position at our county special services school. So working with children with disabilities and both learning and behavioral challenges. Mm-hmm. So that was always my heart, was the kids with behavioral problems, because there was always a trauma that was driving the behavior. So that was really where I loved to be. I did, when I was in grad school, I did spend some time, I did a year's internship at the Vineland Residential School for Children, which doesn't exist anymore. The state,
yeah, we were talking about that on the phone the other day. My mom used to work there.
Yeah, the state closed that, unfortunately. That was a great experience there. And again, after I was done with grad school, the state was allowed to move me wherever they needed me, so I spent a year working in Bridgeton as well. And again, when you work for the state and do child abuse investigations and doing placements and stuff with an adolescent caseload, you are all over the state. So a lot of miles in the state car. So I really got to know this state inside and out.
Yeah, I mean, that's bringing up an interesting aspect for me, because not only were you working for the state technically, but you're saying you had to go all over. And so it's, that adds to the depth of the experience. You weren't just like stuck in one particular office.
Yeah.
You were going around getting to know the state.
That was the best part of the job, was being on the road. Like I said before I moved to West Cape May, and that year of visiting, I had never been south of Atlantic City. I grew up in Central Jersey. I was more of I'm a Giants fan, full disclosure. So, so having the opportunity to see all different parts of the state. We had kids in specialized foster care all over the state, kids in residential treatment centers all over the state. So I really had the opportunity to just travel the roads and see different towns and experience different facilities and treatment centers, etc. So that was probably the best part of the job. And then when I got my graduate degree and was able to kind of fine-tune things, put a little point on my skills, and then take that to our county special services school, which I just loved, and I stayed there till I retired in 2019. So
okay, so
I haven't told you anything about my life in government.
Well, no, that was going to be my next kind of question. When did you start getting a little bit, I mean, you've been doing state level work for decades,
right.
But then more specifically, what was the transition to like becoming mayor and all that?
Okay, so as a social worker, part of what we do is embedded in our DNA is advocacy. So that was something that even in college, I'm old enough to remember, we were actually canvassing for the Equal Rights Amendment when I was in college. This was 81, 82, which we still don't have. So that, I kind of learned how that happened. And when I graduated Gettysburg, my goal was to be a lobbyist. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to DC and plan and help influence legislation. I was active with Big Brothers, Big Sisters when I was in college. I just wanted to help kids who were traumatized. And
you know what might be a little bit helpful is, over the decades that I've casually paid attention to politics, but then, I'm getting more involved or whatever. Can you just unpack what that term lobbyist means a little bit better? Because if you just casually listen to the news, sometimes it's like this supercharged word, like, oh my God, the lobbyists are controlling everything.
Exactly.
What does that really look like?
I mean, you can have those lobbyists. The real estate lobby is very, very powerful in this state. Big pharma is, you hear about that, the impact of big pharma, and that, that their lobby with congressional leaders, etc., is very strong. You'll see some politicians eschew any kind of PAC money, any money that is weighted with that kind of influence. But for me, lobbying means advocacy. So I'm gonna lobby you for a great time on the radio. I'm gonna lobby my neighbors to help me with something.
Is there some sort of on the nose definition there, where you literally just talk to politicians in a lobby somewhere and just try to get in their ear?
I think that maybe
I have no idea.
I never really did a deep dive on what the definition was, but to me it's advocacy, and yes, there are paid lobbyists, and now if I had a dream right now, my dream would be to work for the Innocence Project or something like that. Just advocating for people who are wrongfully incarcerated. That would be the dream.
So to kind of put a pin on it, would you basically say the literal job is just trying to influence politicians to write legislation in a certain way, and just like anything else, it can probably be abused?
Of course, yeah.
Right. So, okay.
Are you doing it for good or evil?
Right, exactly. It's a tool or it's a service, it's an avenue.
Yeah.
Right.
So, that being said, I didn't go to D.C. and become a lobbyist. The friends that I was supposed to move with had gone to Europe and spent too much money for the summer, and I was working down the shore, and I ended up getting my job in Asbury Park as working for the state, and they did something else, and that didn't happen. So I took a different path, road, and it's fine. It worked out just the way it was supposed to.
And so then, when did you become mayor?
So in 2013, then Mayor Cathern asked me to fulfill an unexpired term on Borough Commission. We have 3 commissioners in West Cape May. It's a very small town, and after thinking about it for a long time, I'm like, can I do this? I'm working full time. She's like, there's email. We can work this out. You can come in the morning or whatever. So I agreed, and then I've been on commission since then. So one of the commissioners. So I've been mayor for 8 years. This is my 8th year. So I really wasn't worried about doing the job, because it really just felt like an extension of what I've been doing all along, which was advocating for the needs of my community.
Right.
So
you just kind of walked in as a natural transition.
Yeah, you have to get used to a new chair, a new desk, new staff, but essentially it's the same work, and it's advocacy. It's looking around your community and assessing what the needs are, listening to your neighbors and hearing what their concerns are, and seeing how best you can effectuate some help.
Right. Cool. So you've been doing some type of statewide work for decades, and about a decade as mayor.
Yeah.
Cool.
So again, you asked about the advocacy part of it and the political end of it too. When I first started working for the state, my supervisor at DIFAS was he was the shop steward in the office, and he dragged me to a union meeting and says, well, you got to sign these papers and join the union. I was like, oh, okay. And I did. And that was CWA that I belonged to at the time, Communication Workers of America. And I really understood the role that unions had in effectuating a good working environment for the people that worked for the state, and also the more you upheld the work that the staff was doing, the better job they could do for the families that they took care of. So it was a twofold approach. It's not just advocating for yourself, but it was advocating for families. So,
sure.
So when legislation was pending in Trenton that was important to children and families, there would be days of action. We would go to Trenton and work on whatever the case may be. So
Sure.
it started back then, and I do remember his name too. His name was Bob Bowl, and he was a great supervisor and taught me a lot, not just about the job of social work, but as the job of being an advocate for yourself and others. So he was a great guy.
Can you think of maybe an example or two when you were doing that work that was like a specific change that you were able to effectuate?
It was a long time ago. Seriously, it was a long time
Sorry
ago.
for the pop quiz.
Yeah, that was 87, 88 when I tell the story. I have a picture of my son in a backpack, and we were in the rotunda at the State House, and it was during the Florio administration, and I can't remember what the specific issue was, but I had Christian in my backpack. He's 32 right now, so this was a couple years ago. But so, whatever it was, whatever the administration was, Democrat or Republican, we were advocating for our own rights, our own best workplace scenario, and then legislation that impacted children and families. Some of those things that we talked about back then was when some of the functions of youth and family services were privatized, and the impact that had not just on employees but on the actual services that were provided. So
Sure.
privatization continues to be a big concern.
Cool. Anything else about your general background or experience you want people to know before we move on? Or
If I think of something, I'll come back around.
All right, well then let's go on to the general campaign messaging portion. As is so, I mean, one of the simplest ways to throw this out there is, how do you put in your own words what your campaign is all about?
I'm going to refer to my card here.
Sure.
When I think about campaign priorities, my campaign priorities align with personal priorities and professional priorities in terms of healthcare, education, and the environment. So, again, we were talking before we went on the air about the Puerto Rican Day Parade and just talking with families along the parade route and sharing some literature and asking what their concerns were. One of the biggest concerns I heard from people was healthcare. There were some folks, one woman had the autism tattoo on her arm. She says, "That's for my son." And she said, "I'm really worried about his healthcare. I'm worried about changes in Medicaid. I'm worried about the services that he gets in school."
Right.
So those key issues, healthcare, again, for everyone. You can't be a fully actualized human being unless your needs are being met, whether that's healthcare, whether that's housing, adequate, secure housing that's not going to fall through next month, that's more than just a week at a time. Without having those simple needs being met, food, shelter, a quality education, and healthcare. We can't expect people to then work a job, do all those other things until those basic needs are met.
Right, so you're sort of prioritizing like basic needs.
Yeah.
That way people can be functional and then possibly do higher level work beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a model out there called Housing First, and it truly is as simple as how it sounds, is provide people with housing that is safe and secure and permanent, and then they will avail themselves of services that are needed. So it's pretty simple, but sometimes hard to get to that place.
Do you want to dive into sort of like any specific about how you would help move towards that direction, or?
Well, that's something too that's been Cape May County's been struggling with for well, actually not struggling with, because it's not been a priority of our county government. We have no homeless shelter in Cape May County.
Okay.
At all. We're the only one of 21 counties that has none. The county commissioners would prefer not to believe that we even have a homeless problem, but there are a number of organizations out there that work with the homeless branches, Family Promise, Cape Hope, that work with the homeless in the encampments and doing the work and the care that would beg to differ. So,
you know, I'm kind of glad you brought that up, because I did an interview with Lorraine Smith. Have you met her yet? Yeah. And this was one of the topics that came up, because here in Cumberland County, now I'm not going to go officially on the record like I'm the expert of Cumberland County politics or whatever, but my understanding is a lot of people get bussed in here because we do have some decent services going on. I was actually volunteering at the soup kitchen for a little while, and so I see the people coming in and out, and the Vineland Soup Kitchen, give them a shout out, because they do excellent work over there. But to go back to the Lorraine Smith thing is, you know, she notices that we're getting a lot bussed in here, and her idea is to be like, well, we're happy to take you in for a little while, but you're technically from another county, so how do we work that out so that, sure, you know, you need help for a couple days, but then how do we spread that burden, I guess, for the lack of a better term?
Absolutely. And if it truly is a shared burden, then the funding needs to reflect that. But, you know, you have people have that conversation in Atlantic City. Atlantic City doesn't want to be the answer to Cape May County's problems.
Sure.
And they too are on the receiving end of a lot of our folks at the rescue mission. Great work, but they're overburdened as well as our services in Cumberland County. So, despite the opportunity to do so, and our county government has not taken a stand to make it a priority for them. There's, we have voucher programs, and they can pay up to $700 a week for a hotel room, but won't help someone get adequate permanent housing.
Right.
And there's a lot of reasons why there is such a housing crunch, and we probably don't have the hours to delve really deep into that.
Yeah.
But it's a basic need, and somehow I think leaving it up to individuals, it's becoming apparent that leaving it up to individual property owners is not going to solve the problem. So there has to be some part of government that functions to support people in getting those needs met.
Sure, I get that. So then, not to spend too much time on just that, what else were we about to get into?
What else? I gotta put my glasses back on then. Here I am, there's that picture. Okay. The question was, what about the campaign, right? What's
Sure.
the central tenets of the campaign?
Yeah.
So healthcare for all, obviously we started there. It always seems to come back to there too, because at any time when you talk about what someone's impediments to being the most fully realized human being that they can be, if they have a mental health need, if they have an addiction problem, if they have a chronic health problem of any sort, and there's a disruption in healthcare, whether it's because you're moving from one job to another, that's why healthcare needs to travel with you and needs, I believe in universal healthcare. Mm-hmm. So that's one approach to it. Reproductive freedoms, in moving from municipal government into state government, which is my intention, obviously, reproductive freedoms, we're seeing a federal government who wants to restrict access to abortion. Those services are codified in the state of New Jersey, and we need to make sure that they stay that way. It's extremely concerning, that the party that preaches individual liberties preaches that only for certain people, and except when it comes to women's choice. So, I did actually have to reflect on what some of the core values of the Republican Party is, and when they talk about liberty for everyone, it doesn't feel like it's for everyone.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a supercharged topic, and it's probably
we can charge away.
Well, yeah, but that would be sort of like a very in-depth debate for another day. But generally speaking, I tend to, or I at least like to think of myself as a moderate on the issue, and I just wish that from a starting point that people who are in these high-level positions could sit down and calmly talk about these complicated issues and have it not devolve into some of the discussions I've had over the years casually. And that's what I think part of the issue is just even trying to talk about it really fires people up.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about essential liberties and when someone is trying to legislate what I can do with my body, yeah, it'll get charged real quickly. Sure. Because just tell me one law that affects you and your body.
Well, I mean, if you really want to go there, maybe the draft.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
A little different, but
Yeah, I know it's a different angle, but that's why it can get supercharged real quick, because then
and then you could evaluate why that exists the way it does. That's an essential inequality there,
right?
So, but it's definitely an individual liberty,
Right.
So, and the instances of that being used. When was the last time the draft was used?
That's true. Although during recent developments, I think some of us are a little concerned that it could probably pop off any moment.
Yeah.
Which is, again, this is not supposed to be about me and my personal opinions, but I generally tend to be an anti-war kind of guy.
Oh, I'm a peace and love girl all the way. All the way.
I understand that sometimes it might be necessary, but, it's... I don't know exactly what's going on in Gaza, or I don't know exactly what's going on in Ukraine. Now, I can obviously pay attention to the news and try to have some type of an informed opinion about it, but at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm judge, jury, and executioner and say, all right, we need to send 400,000 troops to Ukraine right now. Like, I don't want to be that guy, right?
What a responsibility.
Yeah.
Well, the thing... I don't claim to be an expert on either of those things myself. I have friends who I rely on for some really informed opinions about the situation in Gaza, about the situation in Ukraine. Obviously I have my own, but sometimes there are people that I really trust to give me more information about current events or today's happenings.
Right.
What I do know is what's being created in those communities is generational trauma, and that is something that it's present in Ukraine, it's present in Gaza, in Israel, in Palestine. Children are being killed when innocent people are being killed, and the trauma that's created from not having a resolution to war is something that's going to be dealt with for generations to come.
Yeah, and I think a common refrain there is it's exacerbating the problem. Yeah. As in, it's one thing to think about it in short term, like, okay, these are the specific people we need to deal with, but in dealing with them, there's, I guess, collateral damage that is not going to be easily forgotten. It's kind of reminding me, I don't know if I told you before, but I did quite a bit of traveling before, and for a while I was in Serbia, and I would go to this dive bar, maybe a 5-10 minute walk from my Airbnb, and the bartender, who had pretty good English, did not hold back in trying to tell me how he felt about the Yugoslavia war. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, yeah, I wasn't the guy having bombs dropped on my city, right? And so maybe that's a bit of a stretch or whatever, but like, I can imagine the people in Gaza are going to feel that too.
So I can relate this to the actual work that I've done with children and families. When you have children who have suffered trauma, whether it's from physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, all those things, it makes it very difficult for them to break out of the fight or flight mode. So imagine those things compounded by bombs and unrest in your community and your physical safety being challenged every single day. So I worked with kids who came to school bearing those scars of trauma, and it was an impediment to learning. And that was my position, was to try to find a way to create a safe space for students to learn. And a lot of times that was really hard to break through. So then you look at these other countries that have had this going on for generations.
It's all they know.
And all they know is those high levels of cortisol and reactivity and fear and not knowing if it's safe to put your head down at night. I literally, when I think about it, I can, it's really upsetting. And it's not something that I think we're going to muscle our way to a solution. That's just not the answer. It hasn't been for me in my life. It's not something I've observed to be true. I think, like I said, I jokingly say that I'm a peace and love girl, but it's the truth.
Right. Well, obviously, if you can avoid the conflict in the first place.
Right. So what does that mean? How do you avoid conflict in the first place? We have to start with building skills. We have to build those skills in kids, and that's.
What do you mean, like mediation skills and?
Well, social problem solving skills. I'm going to give a shout out to my fellow educators at Special Services. We had a dedicated teacher for social skills education at my school. That was what she taught all day, every day, was skill building, social problem solving, conflict resolution. We did it a lot of times. She was a master teacher, and that was one of the focuses that we worked on in school, because the kids don't have those skills. They're not going to learn. They're going to, consistently have beef with their classmates. They're going to get in trouble on the streets, and we're not seeing the outcomes we want.
And it almost seems like an obsessive topic of discussion on social media, like training people how to properly talk to each other and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, people are interested in it, so why not teach basic social problem-solving skills in school, and how do we do it abroad so that people don't necessarily just want to jump on top of each other and kick the crap out of each other over something that might just be something you misheard, So one of the most paramount things that I remember from being in grad school and talking with a therapist that was supervising me at the time was that I always had the question in the therapeutic setting with a client, how do I know what to do next? She said, Carol, the most important thing you need to do is listen to hear and not just listen to respond. Oh, sure.
And that, because a lot of times, and I can feel myself doing it here, but in conversation with people, sometimes you're like, I know what I'm going to say next. It's going to be really smart and really astute, and I'm on point, I'm on topic, but maybe I just want to listen to what Steve has to say and hear what his concerns are. But some people are married to the idea of having the smartest reply, and
it's interesting because I've thought about a lot of that stuff over the years, and especially stepping into this space. I mean, I can kind of see both sides of narrative control. As if if the conversation goes a little bit too sideways and it gets misinterpreted the wrong way, or somebody wants to splice a video together for a clever Instagram ad, it's like, ugh. Now, I tried to have a conversation with somebody and then it just gets manipulated the wrong way. And so I can understand the fear sometimes of, do I really want to sit down and talk to this person I don't really know, who might take all my words out of context, and blah, 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 blah. So.
Well, I'm not running for president, so I'm not really too worried about that right now. And it, you know, when I think about this race, I really just have to let what I feel like is my sincerity and my commitment to the people of District 1 come through. That this is not an ego-driven endeavor that I'm undertaking here. This is really, in my mind, and I think this was one of the questions we were going to talk about, is the why. Why now? Why am I choosing to move forward with this race? And it just felt like a natural evolution of where I've been in terms of my social work career. I don't think of this as politics, although I'm surrounded by politics and influenced by politics and have to navigate the political world. I'm not uncomfortable in that space, but I really am just moving forward for what I feel are the right reasons, and I feel like it's the time to have my voice be heard in Trenton.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, because when I have some of these discussions with my friends or my parents or whatever, that's one of the common phrases that keeps coming up, the right reasons. Yeah. Like, are you sure this person isn't just ticking a box on a resume so that they can get to the next highest office, or, you know, do they just like going to the fancy social dinners and whatever, you know what I mean? And I generally, despite what people might think after having watched my development in this space, I don't want to look at people that way. You know what I mean? It's like, I understand it happens, and sometimes I need to stop giving people too much benefit of the doubt. But, like, I still try to give people that benefit of the doubt first. You know what I mean? But then if I start noticing things, it's like, okay, I have to call a spade after a while. You know? So it's good to hear, and probably a couple people listening right now, they want to hear, I'm in it for the right reasons. That you're in it because you're listening to people on the street and dealing with their concerns face to face, as opposed to it just being a fancy website and an office with a title, or however you want to phrase that.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's too what my work as a social worker has really given me good training for. I'm not afraid of having the hard conversations. You know, I used to knock on people's doors and say, hello, I want to talk to you about your kids and how you're taking care of them. And I had to do it with a smile and with assertiveness and compassion at the same time. So you know, as some people might say, oh, she's, you know, maybe she's nice, she's too nice, but I'm a very assertive person. I can make my ideas clearly known to people with it. I don't think you need to be obnoxious to do that.
Right.
I mean, I'm just going to be me no matter what.
Sure.
I do have a little, I tend to sarcasm when, as a default, try to
you should have
survive
seen me,
the day.
You should have seen me playing with ChatGPT last night. Oh, man. I have to have a certain amount of professionalism when I'm doing this, but by myself, playing with that thing, like, oh, man, I just imagine myself actually saying this. But anyway, so it looks like we got about 12 minutes. Let's just make sure, are there other aspects of your basic campaign messaging that you want to make sure the audience knows before we move on to anything else?
Well, I think too, okay, should I touch it or not?
How about that? I'll try that.
Are we okay?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be fine. Just lean into it.
Okay. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. So in terms of the rest of the things that strong public schools, obviously, I am not in favor of vouchers. New Jersey has limited charter schools, and I think we need to keep it that way. They divert money away from public schools. I think properly funding the public schools and making sure that we get the services that we need in those schools. Again, I don't profess to have all the answers to how some of the decisions being made by executive order from DC are going to impact our area in terms of Title I funding for the schools. Those that hopefully with the good partnership with the governor and the legislature, we can figure it out and collaborate on making sure our kids don't get left out in the cold.
Yeah, sure. No, that is not a caller. Okay. Anything else, or should we move on the thing?
Let's
okay.
move on.
So then, just to keep everything consistent, we might have talked about these 3 ideas that I have on the phone the other day, but just so everybody can hear it in your own words. Part of what I've noticed over the past couple of years is that just cultivating a more engaged and informed public is part of the problem. It's not necessarily that people like yourself aren't willing to sit down and have the conversations and let people know. There's a little bit of this two-way street going on where maybe not everybody is as engaged as they could be, meaning from the public. And so then that turns into a cycle of like, well, what exactly does a candidate need to do to run a proper quote-unquote campaign and all this stuff. So I think about that quite a bit. And so I have these 3 advocacy ideas that I'll run by you, and we can repeat to the public so they can hear in your own words. And the first idea is just reintroducing civics class into schools. Now, I don't know about everybody else who has gone through the school system, and maybe certain curriculums and other places are more robust with this sort of thing. But it seems to be a bit of a common theme that a lot of younger kids are not being robustly or comprehensively taught about civics in general, and then maybe even more specifically local civics. What does your county government do? What does City Hall do? Does anybody even know what a county surrogate does, let alone how do you vote for the Republican county surrogate or the Democrat? When I first started doing this a couple years ago, it was just like, this is just an insane decision for me to make when I don't even know what this person would be doing.
Well, just, for example, West Cape May has a commission form of government. Well, so we have commissioners. The county has commissioners. Just to get the language straight. A lot of people were more familiar with county freeholders, and they knew that word, but that's been updated. There's a reason Mr. Fox was my favorite teacher, and again, this was a number of years ago, so forgive me, but I graduated high school in 1981, so that'll give you a little rough, idea of how long ago that was. But I remember clearly that a great teacher helps you make those analyses on your own. Will give you the information, will spark an idea, will spark those debates, and always had the opportunity to look at things from both sides, whether it was a conflict we were studying, or a war or a conflict, or and then help to create that critical thinking. But in terms of civics, I think that there's an opportunity, whatever segment in a curriculum you're diving into, there's an opportunity to bring that back, that strand back to your local situation, whether it's local government, county, state, whatever you're studying, you can, there's a way to intersect all this kind of thinking. And that's what a good teacher does, is brings you those opportunities to evaluate it. So, I continually, probably close to every day, talk to people about, what it is I'm actually running for. It's a state position. I'm currently in municipal government. So this is municipal government, there's county government, there's state government, and then there's the federal government. So just people just saying it over and over, people are like, oh, municipal, county, state, federal. Okay.
It's like getting the structure by osmosis.
Yes, yeah. So, and I'm not upset by people who aren't clear on the structure of things. I just use it as an opportunity to teach.
Sure.
So, obviously you sitting here in front of this microphone, you have the opportunity to teach as well. You're doing a really good job at bringing it forward,
Or we're just providing the platform so
Absolutely.
that somebody with a hell of a lot more experience than
Yes.
I do can more clearly explain it.
Yeah, so, it's that was your question about civics, right? So,
Yeah, so basically, it sounds like, just by inference, you're in favor of making sure people
Absolutely.
know
Absolutely.
what's actually going on. And I was thinking about this earlier today. In my personal experience, it felt more like I had world cultures class where I was doing reports on Vlad the Impaler or Mad King Ludwig, the guy who did the original Disney castle in Germany, and what was the other, like apartheid in South Africa. And they're all really super interesting topics, but it was like, maybe I should have had Constitution class before that. You know what I mean? Like a priority type thing.
I think I have a copy of the Constitution here if you need one.
But the idea is like, did we actually dive into it in depth and make sure everybody clearly knows what their rights are and
Right.
what the structure of the government
Right.
is? That's my thinking on it.
And even when someone when you talk about the Constitution or someone brings up classic literature or something, I said, a lot of this I read and learned about 40 years ago or more.
Yeah.
So it bears repeating. It bears
sure.
repeating and taking the opportunity to refresh yourself on what your rights
Yeah.
are, what the Constitution
Yeah, even if you
is.
had it in middle school or high school, maybe the county...
That was a while ago.
Yeah, the county college could do a refresher course every
Yeah.
summer or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
remember, like, this is how your local government actually works. And there's been updates.
That's a great idea. That's
You
a great
know,
idea.
why not?
Even like one of the adult learning classes or something
Sure.
like that.
Yeah.
Something somebody could take online or just a webinar or something.
Yeah.
We could be onto something.
Maybe. Then the second idea, we only have about 3 minutes, so we can speed through it. Having the county basically do what I'm doing, as in, not that they have to be playing favorites or anything, but to just collect information from a basic questionnaire, offer a neutral press type interview, and just post it on a website somewhere.
So that used to be, at least in Cape May County, I'm not as familiar with Cumberland, but like the League of Women Voters used to provide those forums a lot, and there is a movement in Cape May County to bring back that type of
Sure.
forum, because it does need to be a neutral presentation, and ideally you get all candidates to participate.
Yes.
So if there's any hint of bias one way or the other, but the League of Women Voters used to do that and present those candidates forums, and
Right.
you see it sometimes. Taxpayers associations offer that in local communities when there's a local race, but like a town like Millville, like you would want to see a forum with all those folks running.
20 people,
So
at least.
there's going to be a fair number running in West Cape May as well. So
All right, and we only got about 2 minutes, so the last one we can do super quick. It's probably obvious.
Was it the hard one?
It's just rebuilding the local press. Like, even if we had the neutral presentation thing, you need people doing the follow-ups and the critical thinking style questions to make sure you really dig in, make sure you're not missing anything. So
what's your ideas for that? So, I mean, obviously, you're taking to the radio, and so we're seeing.
I think it's already happening.
So
we're
on the radio, but we're on Facebook Live. So.
Right. So that's happening. And I think the other day I saw on Facebook McClellan and Simonson at a event, and they were holding up the Vineland Voice, which is like a newer form of our newspaper, and I think it's still developing. And so I think people are listening, and I think Lorraine Smith might be on the case a little bit too.
Okay.
So maybe by me just complaining too much, people are starting to listen.
We can always take our online subscriptions to whatever. I don't have a paper copy of the New York Times coming anymore, but I have my digital copy. But there actually is a paper. Some people like to pick it up.
Yeah, exactly. So it looks like Norm is cutting us off very soon.
Cutting us off.
So I want to thank you very much, Carol, for coming in. This has been a little bit of a struggle over the past couple of years to get people to show up and just have basic conversations, make sure people actually know what they're voting for. And so I know it's super busy. You're at a lot of the events and meetings and stuff. So
doing my best.
Carving out time for little old Steven Solof is much appreciated.
Not a problem.
All right, everybody, this has been Inform the Vote Radio Hour on Cruisin 92.1, WVLT in Vineland, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Want to know the secret to what makes Rita's Water Ice so delicious? Did you know that Rita makes their ice fresh every day with real fruit at each store? It's that combo of real fruit and real fresh that makes Rita's Italian ice